Let's begin with problem 5 of chapter 6. And this is intersection. So we're given two arrays of integer, and then we have to create an array list named intersection that contains only those items that occur in both lists. We have to make sure that we avoid repetitions, right? And so for this case, the result should be 2, 4, 8, 10. That should be our output. So let's get started. We are going to copy this first array of integer and copy and paste. And then let's proceed with the next one. Okay, and now we need to declare the array list of integer, right? That is going to be called intersection. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so now notice that Eclipse is showing us an error message. Why is that? Well, because we need to include a library. So with Control-Shift-O, notice that Eclipse will automatically include it in here, okay, in line 12. So that's going to help us quite a bit. Okay, so how are we going to create this intersection? We are going to need a for loop. We could have a nested for loop, so 2 for loops, but it's probably easier to understand if we have a for loop and inside the for loop a while loop. So that's the way that we are going to do it. It's not the only way, but it is probably the one that is much easier to understand. So let's go ahead and start with the first for loop. We are going to be looping through all the elements of list 1. So let's go ahead and do it. So we're going to initialize with int I equal to 0. So we start at position 0. And then we're going to be looping through all the elements of list 1, right? Okay. Then the first thing that we need to do is to check whether that value, the element of list 1 already exists in intersection. If that is the case, then we should skip and move on to the next element, right? We don't want duplicate. So let's go ahead and now we have intersection that contains, and now we're going to pass list 1 I, right? And of course we have to negate this, right? So if it doesn't exist, then that's when we proceed. If it already exists, then we need to skip to the next element, all right? So that's very, very important. So if the element already exists, right, and we can add it, some comments here. So if the element, if list 1 element already exists in intersection, then skip, right? Skip. All right. If that is not the case, then what do we do? Well, then we have to loop through all the elements of list 2. So we're going to declare another variable, j, and we're going to initialize it to 0. And then we will declare another one that is going to be Boolean, and we call it match. We initialize it to false, right? So at the beginning, we have no match. Then we are going to create a for loop. Once again, this is not the only way of doing it, but it's probably the one that is easier to understand. So we have to loop as long as j is less than list 2 the length, right? We don't want to go out of bounds. And also, as long as there is no match, right? Once there is a match, we should exit this loop, all right? Then we need to give a value to match, which is going to be equal to list 1 I, because remember that we're using I to loop through list 1, right? And then equals to list 2 j, because j is a variable that we're using to loop through list 2, right? Okay, then after that, we should increment j, right? So we go to the next element. Now, this is not required, but it's a good idea to add parentheses here so that it is a lot easier to understand that we are actually performing this condition, right, this Boolean operation first before assigning a value to match. So let's see if we can understand what's going on in here. Well, we initialize j to 0, and then we initialize the variable match to false. Then we are going to loop in this while as long as j is less than the number of elements of list 2, and also as long as there is no match. So match, as long as variable match is false, right? We are going to keep looping. Then inside the loop, we are going to assign a value to match, which is going to be true if the element of list 1, I, is equal to the element of list 2 of index j, right? If those elements are equal, then match will be equal to true. And then we increment the value of j. So if one of these conditions, right, becomes false, either j is larger than the number of elements of list 2, or if we found a match, then we are going to exit this while loop. And then we need to check if there was a match, right? So if there was a match, so that means the value of variable match is equals to true. Then we need to add the element to intersection. List 1, I, we just add it to the list, right? Okay, then believe it or not, that's pretty much it. Now all we need to do is to display the array list intersection. That's all we need to do. We can have a for loop, or we can use another way of doing it, print ln, and now we're going to do arrays that toString. This is another way of printing intersection that to array. Okay, and that's it. So that's all we need. Let's go ahead and run it. And notice that we get 24810, which is exactly what our program should list. All right.